Hello, my name is Bill Leahy, K0MP. I've been an advisor for CW Academy since 2017. And I wanted to make a video here about things to know even before you start to learn code. This is uh, going to be about learning code. It could be for the first time, a beginner. It could be advanced. So these suggestions that I'm going to make will be good for students, those who are in the academy, and also the ones who want to learn alone, like I did back in 1964. So back then, we didn't have all the advancements we have now, technical advancements. And I learned from a book like this. And it did a pretty good job for the time. We didn't have computers, we didn't have apps to learn from, lots of things that we didn't have then. And we also didn't have the knowledge that we have now of how the brain works while you're learning CW. So we're going to go through a little bit of my suggestions that I use in my class, and hopefully they'll help you. And wherever, whether you're a student or you could be another advisor, these might help you. So the first thing is when we learn anything in life, we want to know why we're doing it this way. How there may be other ways to learn CW that are easier, much easier. And that's where we fell into a problem back in the day. And we got into these problems that created pitfalls. We hit plateaus. We got so far in recognizing code, it limited our speed down. And we didn't know why. We got frustrated. And in CW, frustration or anything that you try to learn, if you're frustrated, treat that like the enemy. You don't want to be frustrated at all. And it really helps to know why, and then you won't become as frustrated as you might be. And you'll know how to control your emotions. And this is part one of a series of two videos that I'll make. One giving you some suggestions on how to study code, and the second one will be a deep dive into what's happening up here and why it may be frustrating and how to curb those frustrations so you can learn faster and easier. And so I think these will be helpful for you. So we need a way to stop these frustrations and anxiety that we might have. So if you don't know why, it's just going to make things that much harder for you when you try to learn CW or anything for that matter that requires concentration and memory. And in those days, we had to learn CW to get our license. And if you wanted a license, you would learn code at 5 words a minute. You would progress up to 13. Before you hit 13, you'll hit a nice plateau, and it'll take seemingly forever. And the object of the game back then was to get to sideband. And so as soon as we got to sideband, a lot of us were happy. We didn't go back to code anymore. What's the easiest way to eliminate frustrations? Quit. Well, that's not an option right now. So there's various reasons, especially for people 40 years of age or older, that we learn now. We don't have to have CW as a requirement for getting a license now. But there's another reason, even more important, that learning different things like languages, other languages, CW, anything that requires concentration helps us mitigate the onset of some nerve disease, or excuse me, brain diseases, such as dementia, Alzheimer's. That's a little bit a more pressing situation here. So this is going to help that. It's going to help reduce you possibly getting that from 40 years of age up, because the brain starts to deteriorate a little bit from that moment on. That's just the physical nature of our bodies. It's not anything in particular for any person, but about 30% it will decrease the risk. And if you're predisposed to it, then I've read that it will decrease or increase actually the onset of it 5 years. So you'll gain another 5 years. So that's a good thing. So CW is good. We all have, most people that see this video have ham radio in common. So this is something we can do in ham radio in our hobby, in our chosen hobby, for the veterans especially of the hobby, that will help keep our brain healthy. So there's a double reason for learning CW, even at a later age. In classes that I've done, ages range from late 20s to 80, and all in between, all experiences, all veterans of 40 years in ham radio, and people that are just starting from the beginning. So these suggestions will work. They've proven to be very beneficial, assuming you know them at the start. And that way you can control your brain, control your teaching. In my classes, I always say, there's a reason I'm called an advisor and not a teacher. I'm not the teacher. The student is the teacher. I'm advising him how to teach. And the student is the brain. And it's very, very easy to teach, but you can't abuse it. And so we don't want to abuse it, because if we abuse it, that's when we'll start to get frustrated, and we don't want that. So just remember that. I'll be looking at some notes here, so I don't want to leave anything out. So we are going to advise you on your studies, mentors, advisors, however you want to learn CW, or by yourself. Look at some videos. You'll have to get a little bit educated on how to teach yourself if you're just alone. It's much easier to have a skilled advisor or mentor than doing it by yourself, because he's going to help you over the bumps and pitfalls and things like that that you might run into. So patience and perseverance is the way to do this. And the nice thing about it is we can't study too hard. That's one of the things that we'll talk about here a little bit. So we need to know these things before we start. One of the first things is, please don't use any visual aids. Gosh, in the old days, we had charts. A dot and a dash was an A. You looked at it. What's an A? You looked at it. Please don't use those. Learning CW is totally an audible kind of a language. We can't see RF coming in. We can't to do anything like that. So please just use audible types of applications to learn. So if you start using A is for apple kind of thing, and you see an apple and that's an A, that's not good. And the reason it's not good, it's going to take up time. It's using more of your brain, different parts of your brain to aid in CW, and that's not going to work. We want to keep it all in the audible side if we can. So select the times so you practice. It's got to be a quiet time. You can't be interrupted, because you're going to be required to concentrate maybe a little bit harder than you have been in a long time. So I've had students from the East Coast. I'm in Arizona. Back in the East Coast, take my class. Start time 7 o'clock here, 10 o'clock their time. Why? The house is quiet, the kids are in bed, and they can concentrate. So make sure that you pick the time, and it may not be the same time every day, but pick a time when you're ready to concentrate. You're not thinking about any other things, and you can develop or have some time to dedicate, to studying very hard. You need to be able to accept mistakes. You're going to make a lot of mistakes in learning CW, and you'll keep making mistakes even if you're a skilled operator. Everybody makes mistakes. So don't get down on yourself. Frustration. If you make a mistake, use it as an opportunity for learning. Figure out why you made the mistake. Don't just castigate yourself and say, Bill, doggone it, gee whiz. Don't do that. That's frustration. Think about it. Why did I make the mistake? Did I make the mistake because I didn't know the letter when I'm trying to, in the beginning? Well, maybe you need to go back and study that letter again. You can't, your recognition time for that letter is too long. Did you make a mistake because somebody dropped a pot in back of you on the tile floor and made a lot of noise and broke your concentration? That's another kind of a mistake. Not quite so bad, okay? So there's various levels of mistake that you have to treat a little differently, and just treat them. And will this mean that you don't make the mistake again? No, but it's going to cut down those mistakes as you proceed in learning. Your concentration can be broken in a split second. If I copy 5 letters in a row correctly and I start to think, Bill, boy, you're doing, I've lost my concentration. I'll probably miss the next one. So part of learning CW is increasing our concentration and increasing our memory. Well, guess what? Those are good things to exercise your brain too, no matter if it's code or anything else. The different thing with learning a foreign language, if you use the foreign language after you learn it, then that's great. But if you don't use it, if it's for a vacation and you go to France and you learn some French and a few words, 10 years from now, if you never go back and you don't speak to anybody here in French, you probably won't remember those very well. So we need to keep using whatever we learned even after we learn it. So another thing is, and this is an old axiom, don't count dits and das to remember what the letter is. Don't do that. And guaranteed you'll try and do it. Skilled operators, they're almost invited to count dits and das. If somebody sends to them at 5 words a minute and they're used to copying at 30, you can have a cup of coffee in between the characters, and you're almost encouraged to count them. Try not to do that, okay? Especially when you're learning. We learn characters totally by sound. It's much the same way as we learned English. So in part 2, I'll really get into that deeply and how CW compares to English, how we learned it when we were little children, how we learn CW now, the differences, which are not great, and some of the things that are exactly the same that happen in CW that we take for granted in English all the time. It's very interesting in the deep dive part of this. But these are just kind of suggestions when you start how to learn code. We don't want to write anything down. That's another old axiom, and it holds true today just like it did then. And it's easier to write things down now. Got that. But don't do it. If you do it, that's one of the big pitfalls that you'll hit. And it'll be nice up until a point, and I'll explain that a little bit more in part two, but you'll hit a point where it just takes too long to do those things to gain any kind of speed. And I'm not talking about high speed or anything, just average speed. You'll hit a pitfall. Same thing we sort of did at 13 words a minute. We really were doing it at 20, trying to get extra class licenses. But we did it. And we were learning things not really associated with code. How do I write faster? How do I write that fast and be able to have the examiner in those days look at what you wrote down and even understand what it looks like. So it all needs to be done in the audible portion of your brain. And if you do that, you'll be much faster. You won't hit the roadblocks anymore. And it'll really eliminate some frustrations. Another thing to do is we like to have you study an hour a day. And you can say, well, I'm so busy. I have to play golf. I have to work. I have to do this. I have to do that. I don't want an hour. Well, I suggest that you don't do an hour. You do an hour a day, but break it up. Start with a 20-minute or at the most half hour, because we don't have the mental acuity yet to keep our concentration for that long a period of time. We have to grow into it. This is another good brain exercise. So keep it to a couple of 20-minute or 3 20 minutes or 2 30-minute sessions. And what will happen is, and this happens to skilled operators too, it's just that maybe they go faster and they can do it longer. That's all. The brain is working the same way. Only they have extended their mental acuity time to hours and hours sometimes. Where when you start, we're lucky to have it for 15 seconds. So what will happen is you may make more mistakes when you first start. A warm-up period. Expect that. That's fine. And you'll get better and better. Maybe you'll get into a rhythm of copying. And then eventually, as you progress in time, you'll probably start making more mistakes again. And that's your brain getting tired. Listen to your brain always. Listen to the brain. When it starts making more mistakes than normal, it's trying to tell you, I'm tired. Stop. Stop now. Okay? Don't progress on. You're just going to get yourself frustrated, and the brain is going to eventually, and we'll come to this in a little while, pretty much shut you down for code, and you'll really be frustrated. Okay, so frustration is the enemy. If you get frustrated, stop and figure out why you're making these mistakes. Maybe you just studied too long. You're doing great, and all of a sudden you fell off the cliff. You're making more mistakes. Normal. The brain is tired. Give it a break. Literally. So always pay attention to what your brain is telling you. Pretty soon, as you progress in code, it's going to be telling you some good things. Generally, back in the day, nobody really told us what would happen. Do we always have to copy individual letters and spell them out in our brain, and that's not how it works. It's not how it works in English. It's not going to be how it works if you progress in code. Your brain eventually will take over. We'll come to a point where you're going to have to trust your brain, because normally you're trying to get letters, remember the letters, put them together as a word. Yeah, that's hard. That's hard. That's the way we learn. And usually that's all we know. And as soon as we could stop that stuff, we did. And went to some other mode or something. This is too hard. That's crazy. Well, that's not how it really works when you get a skilled operator. Your brain will take over. You'll be taken out of the picture a lot. You won't have to coax your brain into remembering things anymore. It's just going to come. Just like you're understanding me what I say right now in English in milliseconds. When you first start code, it may take you 5 seconds to remember what A is. Big difference in timing. As you train your brain, you're going to be in the millisecond time range again on that sort of thing. You just have to train your brain. Again, that'll be in part 2. Okay, next, um, you can modify your sessions. If it's 7 o'clock and in the evening, every night you do it, maybe tonight you don't feel like doing it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Wait until, if you have to wait till the next day, do it the next day. Treat your brain right. If it's multitasking and you're trying to study and your brain is flipping over to, I have to go to the store after this, I have to do this, I have to mow the lawn. It's not going to work. Stop. Stop the code. Go mow the lawn, go to the store, whatever you need to do. You know, but the brain, when you're first learning, has to be clear because you're going to be using all of it. So, concentration is the name of the game, and you can't have things that are breaking that concentration. If you do, mistakes, frustration. All right. Always think positive. When we start learning, this wasn't from the old days, that's for sure. Think positive. If you miss a letter for whatever reason, try to copy the next letter. Don't lose your concentration. That's what'll happen. Again, if you miss a letter and I say, Bill, doggone it, and then 2 more letters go by, well, I'm more frustrated now, right? So what I'm trying to do is drop a mistake and keep going. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So if you can do that, that is a sub goal in learning CW. There's many sub goals in learning CW that you'll go through. And this is one of them. To drop a letter, keep your concentration, keep going. That's good brain exercise. Again, for older people. And really, we're always encouraging people to get on the air. And that's one of the best ways to study code, really, is to listen to it in real life, in reality. But I'm here to tell you that eventually, when you come to a certain point and you're pretty skilled, you can keep it up now with some, and the right ones, applications on your computer that you can do. I still do them not every day, maybe every other day, 20 minutes. That's all I do. And I'll go through this maybe in part 2, but I'm as fast today at 77 years old as I've ever been. And I'll tell you, at 50, no, I wasn't there. So I learned most of my speed, part of it, would be 70 years old. 70 years old. I learned code at 14. And I went a lot of years being at a mediocre speed. That's another thing. Don't get intimidated by numbers of speed. That's why I'm not really saying individual speeds. You'll be surprised. A very good person that I knew, who was an advisor, said there's nothing special about a brain learning up to 40 words a minute. 40 words a minute. Never even believed that was possible at all. But the brain can do it if you're diligent and study correctly. Okay. There's also easy ways to get around non-structured lessons. Let's say you sit down for 20 minutes. Um, if you skip one or can't do one for one reason or the other, you have to drive to work and you're busy. You can look at billboards. You can look at everything in front of you. Just about has some writing on it, and you can go through it in your head. I once taught a person CW. We were driving from Seattle to Missoula, Montana, and that time he knew all the letters. And we were doing billboards and things like that. But you can do that. Is that going to stick with him forever? Not unless he uses it. But that's one way to do it. Now, on the other hand, be careful of that, because if you come home and do your 2 or 3 other 20 or 30-minute sessions, this is adding to it, and your brain may get tired. Trust your brain. Listen to your brain, what it's telling you. Stop. You're done for today because you did the extracurricular activities aside from your regular studies. So just be careful. All you got to do is your brain will tell you what to do all the time. You just have to listen to it. You can't force it. You know, I'm going to learn 20 words a minute from ground zero within 2 months. Probably unrealistic. So sub goals are very good. You know, I'm going to progress this far. I'm going to do some studies and maybe get this far. Maybe 1 word a minute at a time. We're not going from 5 words a minute to 15 words a minute, 25 words a minute. That's a recipe for real frustration. So don't make unrealistic goals. That's why it's better to have a mentor of some sort helping you that knows these things. And your goals may be different if you're an amateur, and most people are that are learning code. But again, if you're not an amateur, you don't have a license, there's no reason why you can't learn code. I've had them in my classes. Do you have a license? No. What's your goal? Well, my doctor told me that this was a good thing to learn because they were up in age, maybe 60s, not that old. But they were there trying to learn code and did. So keep that in mind. So sub goals are a good thing. We'll touch a little bit on some steps when you're first starting. There's 2 really important steps. One wasn't really accentuated, shall we say, or even addressed in some of the older times when we learned code. We've developed some things that we use in code now that I've found that have been very beneficial. And the buzzword for them today is ICR, instant character recognition. What's instant? Why? Ask why for everything. There should be an answer. That's what I did. When I was young, learning code, I didn't ask why. I just wanted to get the 13 words a minute to get my general. That's all. But now, when I was 70 years old, I decided, hey, it's time. It's on my bucket list. Let's not be so intimidated when we get on the air. If we call CQ, I don't care if you're a contester or you're a rag chewer, somebody is going to come back to you faster than you can handle, and you're going to look like a fool, right? I didn't want that. And so I finally realized everybody makes mistakes too. Everybody. So I'm not going to worry about that anymore, and I'm going to study and try to get up to speed. And it worked. But this time was different. I paid attention. I had a mentor who gave me one lead on a particular application that I used, but I paid attention on how I used it. And it made a difference, And I went places I never thought I would ever go. And again, well, these things are happening in my brain now. It's too bad that you don't know about it when you first start. And that's one of the reasons I'm making these videos. I'm telling you what happens to your brain. At first you think, well, I've never heard of anybody say that happened to them. I wonder why that happened, because it's very strange. All of a sudden my brain has taken over. Or it's completing things that I don't even know or had any input in. Me, not the brain. The brain is telling me things. Bill, this is what it is. No, it's not. No, because I didn't even copy one letter. Okay? Bill, that's what it is. And sure enough, that's what it was. And now you're wondering why. And there's a good reason. And we do the same thing in English when we talk. We just don't pay any attention to it. And I'll go through that in the second video. So there's some good things that'll happen after we pay our dues at the beginning and teach our brain correctly. It's going to get easier, not harder. So you can look forward to that. Again, you need to keep using, once you know the code and you're trying to build up speed, you're using the right applications. And there's some videos here on this channel that'll tell you some applications to use, depending on what skill level you're at. If you do that, you're going to have to dedicate at least a year, I would say. Either do the applications or more preferably get on the air and do both. If you do that, you're going to embed that into the neurons in your brain. And you're going to make the synapse, the links between the neurons, stronger and faster. This is part 2, kind of a tease, I guess. It turns out neuron to neuron, I mean, we're worried about what, seconds to 2 milliseconds. 2 milliseconds, we can, if we keep things in the right part of the brain, it's very fast, very fast. Okay, if you're doing a session, if you happen to be a student in a CWA class, don't practice immediately before the class. Why? Because you're using up your mental acuity time. I've had many students, especially at the end, they try to cramming. Cramming doesn't work in CW. Then they get into the class and their brain's worn out. And I know they're better than that. Did you study before class? Yep. Okay, and one of the most important things is from day one, if you know no code at all, or if you're going from 30 to 40 words a minute, in your studies, you need to be successful at least 60% of the time. Nobody told us that before. 60% of the time you got to be right. Even if it takes a long time, if you go slow, you adjust that to be 60% of the time. And when you get to be about 80, 85% of the time, you're right. It's time to increase the speed. That's how you stair step up. So you always try to stay in that 60 to 85, 90%, let's say, when you're right. If you go to 100, well, that's great. You deserve a gold star on your forehead, but you're not progressing. You always have to challenge yourself all the time, whether you're a beginner or you're going from 35 to 37 words a minute. You have to challenge yourself. I copied 35, 100%. Yeah, but we're trying to get to 40, let's say. Or we started at 8 and we're trying to get to 10. Well, I copied eight words a minute, all correct. Yeah, okay, that's good. But now go to 10. So what's going to happen? Your percentage is going to go down normally. That's what we expect. And you'll work your way back up. And then you'll go to 12 and then 14. That's how it works. Another one of the most important ones, again, that I've touched on before is don't hit the wall. I call it hitting the wall. And what that is that will be a time where you study maybe 2 hours. Maybe if I study a little bit more. 4 hours a day, 4 hours a day, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. It's really going to cause frustration. Your brain will pretty much shut down for code. You don't do that. I call it hitting a wall. If you do it just a little bit over, you'll feel you're making little more mistakes. And I call that kind of glancing off the wall. I've had students call me, say, Bill, I can't remember even some letters that I just learned last week. What had happened? Well, he studied a long time. This was a grown man. And he just studied a lot. He really was an overachiever. So sometimes overachieving doesn't work in this game. So how do I do it? What happened? And I told him. And I said, the remedy for that is stop all code work. Don't do anything for the rest of the day. Kind of check it out tomorrow, see how you're doing. If you're still having a problem, don't do anything tomorrow. It'll come back. And it does. It comes back and you may be better than you were before. But for that time, essentially you've had a radio blackout. And it's kind of disconcerting when it happens. But again, that's a mistake. You study too much. Okay, that's the answer to it. Good. Now you know to listen to your brain when it gets a little tired. And you'll progress faster that way. You won't progress faster by studying longer. So, again, these are not just suggestions for beginners. It's for advanced people too. Works the same way. You need to increase your recall time. I said it before, the ICR, instant character recognition. When students learn characters individually, and then they try to recall them in certain applications, it may take them 4 or 5 seconds to begin with. But as they learn more and more, that recall will go down. And beginners, they work down to the 1 second level. It's important, I've found in my classes, that you do ICR training right from the beginning, right when students are learning their letters for the first time even. And you need to keep that repetition up. Again, that's in part 2. But the repetition will take it from a short-term memory into a longer-term memory. There's about 4 steps to memory. There's, short-term memory is 15 to 30 seconds. Sometimes it's not even that. We have to increase it out to that point when we start. And after that, we can start putting words together. The stair step is instant recall as fast as you can. When you hear a letter, you recognize it. That's the first step. But along with that is the extension of the mental acuity. How long are you good for to remember these things? A little step 2, or part 2 here. A normal beginner mistake will be, he knows all the letters. I send him a 4 or 5 letter word. I send him wheel, WHEEL. And it takes him maybe 4 or 5 seconds, maybe, or 3 seconds, whatever, to recognize each individual character. And maybe he gets them all right. I send a W, W. Okay, good. Now I send an H, H. All right? And he gets all the letters right. What's the word? Don't know. Don't know what the word is. That's the mental acuity. The slower we go, the harder it is. So some of the things that we do nowadays really enhance that. We don't send it 5 words a minute anymore when you're learning. We send it 20 or 25 words a minute. Faster. You're just remembering the sound. This is a little tease for the part 2 section, but we'll get into that real deeply. Some of the things that we'll go over will be, why was it so hard in the old days? What mistakes were we making? And what happened? I can tell you what the mistakes were, but how does that happen? Why was it taking so long for us to learn those things? So that'll be in part 2. You can look forward to that. And that's pretty much my suggestions. Hopefully these will help you, whether you're a student or you're learning on your own. Definitely exercise your brain. We're always told all the time to go to the gym, exercise. If you don't exercise this up here, we're not using it as much. When we're especially when we're retired, we're not working anymore. We're not using our brains as much as we used to have to. And they get a little stale. Those links get weak, and sometimes they go away. So with that, I'll end this, and I wish you the best of luck in CW, whether you're in a class or you're learning it on your own. So we'll hopefully see you, and maybe on the air. That would be great. And we'll see you later. Goodbye.